Welcome to Securing the Future podcast with your hosts Jesse and Ramin, where we discuss the latest cutting-edge technologies and how they are affecting the security industry. Join us as we explore the latest advancements and discuss how these innovations are shaping the future of security. With Jesse, a skilled recruiter, and Ramin, a seasoned security leader, this is the show where industry expertise meets in-depth discussions.
We are real excited for another episode of Securing the Future podcast. And you know what? One of the reasons I'm actually excited is because Ramin finally wore a V-neck today. So I'm very happy. We did not prep our guest, Chris Follin, which we're so excited to chat with you, Chris. Welcome to the show. And Ramin, if you want to say hi to everyone.
What's up, guys?
So really excited for us to dive into a topic today, get to know Chris a little bit, hear his story. But most importantly, we want to talk about how we can address this talent gap, especially if you're a leader looking to find a way to continue to build your team in a down economy. That can be quite challenging. Chris has some incredible insight into that he's going to be sharing today. And we'll title this Developing a CI/CD Pipeline of Cyber Talent, which I love the topic. I love how you talk about this, Chris. So real excited to dive in. But first of all, warmer welcome to the show, Chris. Thanks for coming on with us today.
Thank you.
Chris is a very successful security leader. He's currently a vCISO and does a variety of different consulting gigs for major companies. He is a published author of a couple different books and also runs a career coaching school. So, Chris, love to hear a little bit of your story. How did you get into security in the first place? And just kind of walk us through a little bit of your background.
Well, I'll start from the very beginning. While I was a kid in the Caribbean, the island tech, she was working on our business computer and had all the guts spilled out because she needed to upgrade the hard drive so that they could upgrade from Windows 95 to Windows 98, and I got sucked in. Ever since then, spent my young summers at an internet cafe removing viruses and eventually doing the first upgrade to Windows XP and then teaching my mentor the skills around that. Fast forward through my career, I eventually decided in 2008 when everything crashed, I wasn't doing cybersecurity, I wasn't doing IT, to just, if I'm going to have to work so hard to make a living in this down economy of 2008, might as well go back and do something that I love doing. So I quit my job. I decided that I was going to go down this IT path once and for all, and got some certifications. I took studying for them like I would any educational program and not just go in, memorize, pass certifications. And for some, it seemed like all they wanted to do at the time was pass that certification. I wanted to learn the knowledge that I hadn't learned in my own career, but also that I hadn't learned just from doing stuff. So I learned a lot just from doing stuff, and here I was just connecting all those concepts together and how they would work in an enterprise environment. One of my first roles in a help desk role, I saw someone having a password on that good old sticky note on their keyboard, and I said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And that started my cybersecurity career then, because even in a help desk IT role, I was thinking, how can we do this safer and more securely around every turn, whether it was rights management, new user creation, troubleshooting, imaging, you name it. I always thought, how could we do it more safely? How could we do it more securely? As I grew in my career, I wanted to formally do security. And I ran into an imaginary glass ceiling, so to speak. Switching from that IT role to that cybersecurity role took a lot of effort, took a lot of time, and I would say my journey almost took 7 years from that first time to when I got my formal title. And that really made me want to give back to others looking to do the same. And that's where I got the idea with Renee Small, my co-host and guest host at this point. She was a recruiter also facing that same problem. And we decided to start the Breaking Into Cybersecurity podcast because literally it felt like breaking that glass ceiling into cybersecurity is what I had to do and what others were facing to do. We knew there was no one way in because it was such a green field at the time. 5 years ago, still a green field. Today, still an evolving field. I would say a little more mature with regards to some of the titling, but we wanted to get individuals that had just broken in within the past 5 years to all share their diverse experiences. Along the way, wrote a couple books, how to create your cybersecurity career path, and then how to hack your cybersecurity interview with some great co-authors, Ken Underhill, Gary Hayslip on the Path book, and Tia on the hacking in your cybersecurity interview. For myself, in the past 5 years, I grew to formalizing a coaching program where I helped senior leaders go from that tactical approach to a more strategic approach. Also, to work more with the business, to be able to communicate and understand how businesses approach cybersecurity, because most of the times security leaders were always focused on what they needed to do tactically to deliver a secured program, but that didn't always align with the business mission. So have them change their frame of mind as to how they're thinking about solutions and how they could better work with the business. And myself as a security consultant, what I did day to day, I also took that approach into my consulting role on a day-to-day approach. Whether I was an internal stakeholder or an external stakeholder, I approached it with that coaching and consulting mindset.
It's interesting, Chris. Your background's kind of opposite of mine. So I started my career in security and then wanted to get away from security, and then came back to security. But it's interesting, though. We both, I think, share in common. We're generalists at heart, right? And there's a few books that I've read on the topic of specialized versus kind of more of a generalist. And the more I learn about that and that approach and how we learn different as generalists, it's a completely different way of engaging us. And as we embrace more the generalist and embrace more the approach of learning, we want diversity. We want the challenge of putting on those type of roles and being able to go deep into them and then come back out and then learn another topic. And it's, as you talk about that, I kind of hear a similar path that I went on for my own journey, regardless of the topic. But in terms of the generalist, right, I can hear how what drives you, right? Even the diversity of writing books. And you mentioned you're doing a podcast as well, and just reaching out and wanting to kind of try different things. It really does resonate that you are a generalist and you're a strong communicator, and you think about security in that way. My background in security started off very technical. I started off as a SOC analyst, so I would say that's a very different way of thinking about security compared to like a security leader today trying to communicate risk to other executives. So I really appreciate your intake or your input and really your background.
Yeah, and I'd say as you grow in your security leadership journey, you have to become more of a generalist. You might have been that SOC manager, you might have been that DLP or infrastructure manager for security infrastructure, but as you grow into that leadership role, you almost have to step away from that hands-on keyboard technical approach and be able to see, okay, from the infrastructure perspective, how does that integrate with the business? What are the core resources that rely on this to function, and what are the critical components that I need to worry about? And those are the types of things that as a technical manager you don't think about, because you just want to think about how does my infrastructure run, Am I delivering what I need to deliver? And that's it. Then you pass it up the ladder. As you go up the ladder, you have to think the total opposite. How do all the core components from below interact with the larger business to ensure that we're helping them deliver on their business mission?
Absolutely. It's that siloed world typically that you see in a corporate environment, right? As your subject matter expertise, you're in a bubble, right? And as you go up in your career, you're like, there's others here too. And I need to play with them, play well.
Nicely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it's cool to hear your progression, Chris, and the fact that you also started a podcast with a recruiter. Seems kind of similar to Ramin and I. I think it does go well together, and it's great that you guys are continuing to evangelize this to the world, right? To encourage those that really want to pursue a career in cybersecurity, some of those tactical steps in preparation, because I think there's a lot of misinformation that's been put out there, especially the statistics around how many open jobs and how in demand cybersecurity is. And we need kind of a set of reality to, hey, this is not an easy process. It's not easy to get your foot in the door, but it's possible. And here's some of the steps that you need to take. So that's fantastic. And I guess as we talk about talent, there is a lot of different ways that we can go into this conversation. But I think right now I talk to a lot of cybersecurity leaders, and the frustration I'm hearing is their teams are overworked because budgets are being squeezed, and some companies, of course, we're seeing a lot of layoffs to try to increase profit for the investors. So as a security leader, how do you not get burned out right through this when you know there's certain things that have to be done, or else your company is at a major risk for a security breach? And so you have come up with a really good process of thinking the same way that you think about DevOps, right? An agile development process where you're continually integrating and continually deploying. And how do you think about almost that same concept as a leader to develop a talent pipeline? So I'd love to hear what you have kind of built in your mind, what you've seen work, how you've been teaching this and evangelizing this.
So this spread from my work at a nonprofit called Whole Cyber Human Initiative, where we wanted to be able to help individuals that were not in cybersecurity, and primarily we started from a veteran perspective, transition into the cybersecurity work pool. And we wanted to find a way that we could create a path that helped them get from, I don't know much about cybersecurity, but I'm interested, to I can start in this very niche vertical and start to grow my way up. Because most of the times you do have to start as a specialist before you can grow up to a generalist. Most companies do want to hire someone that has that niche, that can go and deliver in this specific area, and that leads to some of the high job numbers that you talked about, but that's a whole different story. So I like to think about the workforce in three stages. In the current workforce, so people that are working today, whether they are in cybersecurity or not. And then we can think about the incoming workforce as those that are still in their educational phase or finishing up their education, and you're the next set of individuals that are going to be coming into the cybersecurity work pool. And then finally, the future generation, the much younger kids that are still in elementary school and middle school, because we do need to start thinking about them, especially as we're such a digital first environment. I mean, kids at 6 and 7 already have mastered mobile devices and already have a digital first life because their parents have provided them with technology, likely when they were much younger, just to entertain and keep them busy. So we do have to teach them that. So thinking about this in a DevOps approach, you have to think about, okay, what are the skills and competencies that we need to develop for all those specific roles? And then how can we identify those skills and competencies for individuals that are in different parts of the current workforce. So local state government, military, public, private school, private companies, or independent contractors. And from that, be able to extract those transferable skills from their current role into the role that they want to do in cybersecurity. So today I recorded a podcast episode with an intelligence analyst. This intelligence analyst collected intelligence while it was directed at military incursions and things like that you wouldn't think would be a cybersecurity skill set. He was able to see how collecting the information on insurgents can lead over to how do we collect information on threat actors within the cyberspace. So it's highlighting those transferable skills from where they were to where they want to go. And we have to do that for all the roles. But in order to do that, we really need companies to sit down and think about, okay, for this job description, what are the core competencies and skills needed for this role? And oftentimes, companies don't sit down and invest the time to really think about that before they put out the job description. Unfortunately, they might copy and paste the individual that just left their experience into that job description without thinking that this individual was in that role for 2-3 years, and maybe when they came into that role, they didn't have those skills and competencies. So how do we even think back from what's really needed to what you had when that individual left, to really drill it down to what does Jesse need to go out and hire for that entry-level role? And most of the times it's 50% of the job description that they put out is what they really need. And that gets into why when I advise people, usually it's, if you have at least 50%, why not talk to someone there and see what they really need? Because most of the times the in between the job description is different from what the job description really is. And that's why we need skilled recruiters like Jesse and others to talk with the leadership and find out what they really need versus what they put in the requirements.
It's interesting perspective, right? So you're capturing the gap, right, on the company side where they have a need, but then their approach about how they communicate that need and then how they approach the market, whether it's through recruiters or direct. Jesse and I have talked about that numerous times about the extra effort, right? And a lot of times when I engage with companies doing consulting, I notice security is like a mystery box. Even for CTOs, CIOs, that security reports under. It's not an area where they have the expertise. They have the interest to double click, to take the time. They just kind of want to fill that role with a person and say, here's all security accountability, it's yours. But then to your point, you're identifying the gap. The gap is, how do you describe what a company needs, where they are, where they're going, and finding someone that's the right fit for that transition. So I think that's a really good way to, that you summarize, that gap is what I call it. And that's where I've seen a lot of times the value comes in that's not always seen from the recruitment perspective. Right? A lot of times people look at recruiters as someone that just goes and finds you talent, but a lot more of what they do is communicate the gap that you have or had, and then they create that vision of where you're going, and then see if the talent they're interviewing or looking at can fit into that box either today or in the future.
I think I see a really perfect parallel for what you guys were talking about earlier. And I see this in the work that I do, right? You are basically taking what's in their mind, like Ramin was saying, he takes an executive's ramblings and he boils it down to an actionable strategy and plan. And so you're taking requirements and you're translating them into what is a proper job description that's going to attract the right candidates based on what's available in the market. And I think there are multiple parts of that process that are misunderstood or not well thought out. And it's causing a ripple effect in the market where we see, look, we hear this all the time on LinkedIn posts. everybody's complaining about the fact that there's entry level jobs that are posted asking for CISSPs or 5 years of experience with a technology that's brand new, or just the stuff that's ridiculous, right? So you need to have that in between conversation to slow down, put some thought into what is it that you actually need this person to be doing, what does the business actually need, and then you create your job description. Yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be changed overall in our industry.
And one of the tools that I frankly think is really underutilized is that there's a work effort done by NIST to create a workforce development framework that really breaks down a lot of these roles into these core skills and competencies. And while it was done from a government perspective, it's highly translatable. And while the
Yeah.
business might not have the budget or the flexibility to individualize all those roles, to have that many heads of departments or whatever, at least you can combine the needed skills and competencies from those different roles into what you're trying to create. And that communicates better to the market what you really need. Sure, you might need a blend of different things, but at least you can communicate it in a clear way. And I think other companies have created matching services because another way to do that is to say, okay, company, you want the skill and service, and then force the candidate on the other end to say, yes, I've been able to deliver this skill and service, and then now you're able to match the candidates directly together because you're both using a common nomenclature, a common language to do that matching service.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I guess I'll give a plug to a competitor out there in the market, but CyberSN actually has done a pretty good job of this, right? Like taking the job description problem and boiling it down to simple language, percentages of what you're actually going to be doing on a regular basis, so that turns out to be a very simple job description with the right nomenclature, right? Boiling down and putting the functions together. And I think you're talking about cyberseek.org, right? Yeah, it's a fantastic framework. It is a little more government focused, but at the same time, the functions are very similar and easily translatable. I totally agree with you. And it's surprising how many security professionals don't know about that. I did a talk recently for ISC Squared at East Bay, and there was a lot of people that were like, oh, can I get that link? And I'm thinking to myself, you don't know this exists? So yeah, I think more needs to be evangelized about a framework that makes it simple.
Yeah, there's CyberSeek, another free resource for the candidates, but employers do need to contribute a little bit, is Cyber Nights, which helps more with the assessment of the skills and competencies so that you can highlight where your skills are and what you would need to work on in order to get to a desired role. And they even make recommendations based on your skills and competencies. You might be good for this role or that role, so that candidates can start that self-discovery phase of where they want to go in their career.
I haven't heard of Cyber Night. We'll make sure we put the link in the description for this podcast and video so that anybody who's listening can get access to those. That's great. Okay, so let's walk through a scenario, Chris. I want you to kind of get more tactical here as we get into the details. So you're a security leader today, right? Your budget's been cut, and you want to be able to develop a pipeline of existing talent that's in the market, and you want to find a way to continue to develop a pipeline of folks that are coming into the field maybe in a couple of years. What are some of the things that you have been recommending, maybe even a systematic way of approaching that?
So first, with regards to low budget or maybe no budget, let's look at your internal resources and the business units that collaborate with security. Oftentimes, they will have someone that is potentially more interested in security than others, and you can work to develop them into a security champion, or you can have them help with security type roles that they would do within their role and have them help with that aspect. So a business analyst or someone helping in QA, they can help with a lot of the things that a security analyst would do within their role. And because they're a security champion or someone that's interested in doing that, you can start to develop talents within the organization to grow the needed skills and competencies that you might need to fill a role. And then you can hire that person or transfer them from within the org. And that role might be more easily filled by an external candidate than your role. And because you hired from inside, you potentially worked with that business unit to help them hire a replacement, then you're working with a considerably lower budget for your hire and replace than you would if you were looking solely for that security candidate. For developing the next generation or incoming generation, work with your local community colleges, work with your local colleges on their cybersecurity program. Are they developing candidates with the right skills and competencies so that when they complete their college degree and you're ready to come into the workforce, do they have the right skills and competencies? And if you're working with your local colleges, more than likely you're going to have college students coming out of those colleges that are going to want to work with you because they've seen the effort, they've seen your name, they've seen you around school, they've seen you around the presentations, that you're a company that's investing in the next generation, and you're likely to get candidates straight out of that program into your program where you've invested minimal in just sharing back with that community to get your next generation of students in.
Yeah, I was literally just at Full Sail University here in Orlando. They have a cybersecurity and IT program, and I found out they have like over 100,000 alumni, and they have a 80-person career services team that tracks them all and has a database and like would love to connect with other employers that are looking to hire their grads all over the country. So you're right, absolutely. I think just one conversation with someone from a college gives you a new avenue, and they're happy to help for free to give you great people. And they might have alumni that already have experience that have graduated a couple of years ago that they keep track of, right? So there's definitely a lot of great free resources. I agree with that.
Yeah, as we start to think of even future generations, working with your local high schools to develop security awareness programs, or even middle schools for entry into the digital environment, anti-bullying, anti-exposure of too much personal information, so that they understand the gravity of what you're doing as young teenagers, that posting too much information could be harmful to their future or even their current state of mind. Working with them on those awareness, working with them on how to safely work in a digital environment, and just have that awareness from that young age, then you're more likely to have individuals that are interested in these roles when they grow up, because now they can see, oh, this is a job role that is out there, or hey, I've never thought about that. I've always heard about doctors, nurses, policemen, firemen, but there's never been a security professional that came in and talked to our career day. So doing those things helps build the future generation. And again, if you're a legacy company with a large footprint in a local area, working with those schools will create that pipeline for future generations to come. So while you might not have that result or that ROI next year, you'll have it in the years to come. And it's an investment into your community, into your brand that you make for that legacy organization that will far surpass the program that you might only run for 5 or 6 years.
It's interesting how you describe the pipeline, and it almost is more geared towards organizations that have a larger technology and security footprint, right? A lot of times I see smaller companies where you don't even have dedicated security staff, or if you do, it's like minimal or it's a managed service provider. What would you recommend for those type of companies in terms of engaging talent when they do go to market? And then how do you build more awareness for those organizations that are probably SaaS-based companies, they're working with sensitive data, but they don't have the same mindset of a larger company that has a broader program. They're more embedded, as you mentioned, into their communities, perhaps through like universities.
I would say the same way. Go to market with building your brand within, say, local B-sides or local ISC squared or ISACA or whatever chapters in their local areas, because now you're going to have cybersecurity professionals already in the field or potentially more junior in the field looking to build their career as that sort of provider. By building your brand within those chapters, within those security conferences, you can get professionals that are already in the workforce that might be thinking of looking at a new role to consider you as a potential employer.
It's a really good take. And I know you do some VSO type roles as well. I'm curious to get some stories from you around some of those roles you've taken on where maybe security wasn't necessarily a topic that's top of mind for the executives, and how you've maneuvered those and how you've had success kind of bridging some kind of communication gap where security doesn't seem to be the focus, but then they want everything secure, right?
Well, I would describe it to them more as a business risk. So you have to be able to talk in their language. Outside of the security silo, it's not a vulnerability, it's a risk to the business. So you have to talk about it in their language and share how either security can enable them to go faster and safer, how security can help them save money and make things more efficient, and then how security can make things more resilient and be able to help them recover faster if there is a potential incident, as well as maintain their brand because they had a great response to a security incident, because they had security in mind as a way to minimize their business risk. Now they have an approach to restore and recover and communicate that clearly with their customers that this is something that they have as part of their program. And while they might not have a lot of individuals leading that, it's something that they've considered.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think one of the things that would be cool as we get close to wrapping up here would be like a really specific story, Chris, of how you have seen this play out, let's say for someone that you've helped advise on this idea, or yourself, right? In your experiences as a leader, where you implemented some of these practices and you had the payoff. I was curious if you have like a real specific example.
So I would say an example is around building a security champion program. Within my last role, it was something that was kind of, what's the ROI that the business is getting from committing developers to review the security vulnerabilities in a certain area, and like what value do they get from it? And I had to share that sure, they might be devoting some time to remediating vulnerabilities from another team, but in that situation, they were also learning better coding, how to identify vulnerabilities, and how to implement risk mitigation strategies that they can then share with the rest of their team. They can share how they were able to reduce the number of defects produced in coding that never made it to production, how they save time because now they don't have to go back and rebuild things from scratch, and then share that with other development teams to grow the program. So that was something that I was able to work on, and some of the strategies that I was able to use in growing that program.
I like how you describe this similar to your response to building your pipeline of talent, right? All this takes time. All this takes investment. And in the future, right? Not 10 years from now, but at some point in the future, you're going to start seeing where your investment starts returning, right? There's less vulnerabilities being introduced earlier in the process, less defects having to be reworked, and you're more secure, right? These are harder to measure compared to traditional ways that software development is measured, right? So I like where the theme of what you're mentioning, right? The theme of what you're talking about is more focused around investing, it's focusing on the mindset that goes into it. And instead of looking at short-term benefits, which most businesses look at, looking at more long-term and being able to kind of evolve the way you measure these things so that you can look at the bigger picture, right? If you have less vulnerabilities in the long term, right, that might take time to build up. It's worth it versus playing a reactive game every time you go to release code.
Yeah.
I would say like that's exactly it, because when you think of most of the times anyone wants to bring in security, it's always been reactive. An incident, a resiliency issue, an outage, it's always in response. Now, if you work with the business proactively and think about where are they going in the next 6 to 9 months, how does your infrastructure, how does your solutions line up with where you're going and how you can make them more resilient? Now you start to be more proactive and you start to engage with them on what you're developing. They know that their next 6 to 9 months isn't going to deliver instant results. So working with them on their scale with their projects, then you can start to say, well, we're working with you to make you more resilient. You're the ones that are going to be measuring the response to this less than us, because we're keeping your website up longer. We're making it more resilient to bot attacks so that your customers can buy things, or we're making it more resilient to data leaving or customers accidentally sharing too much information, things like that.
I like the way you framed it, right? Because to me, security is an investment, right? It's not something that's gonna necessarily bring in revenue, right? It can be, right? It can be a differentiator in your market, but no matter how you look at security, it's an investment, right? Whether you're looking at people, tools, process, how fast you go based on how tight the controls can be or how loose they are. So you can be brought in early into that investment, or you can be brought in late. I have ransomware. I now need to invest, right? Or ahead of time, let's put preventative measures so that we don't get ransomware. So it's really the way you're kind of capturing it. It's really key about timing. It's key about thinking these scenarios through and thinking what is it long term that's going to benefit the company or the organization. Right? Having those discussions, right, and being able to communicate them to executives, right? That's the power of, I'm sure, what you bring as a VC. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, this was great. Well, we are at the end of our time here. Chris, this is fantastic. Some of the just simple but yet very effective ways of approaching building out your talent pipeline. And I think the biggest thing that I glean from this is you have to invest thought, time, and be more strategic about how you approach this problem versus it being a reactive, let's just try to quickly get this fixed, and it just doesn't work long term. And so great leaders think ahead, they plan, they strategize, they look at trends, and you've done a fantastic job of that. And so, definitely want to mention, if you're a technical leader that wants to kind of learn how to get ready for that next level, definitely reach out to Chris and set up some time to talk with him about his coaching program. Happy to continue to get this out to the community as well, Chris, for additional VCSO opportunities for you, as well as potential full-time positions if it's the right opportunity. Will hopefully also help you there in just evangelizing that. But thank you for coming on the show. Our goal here is securing the future, and there's so many pillars to that. It's talking about the technologies. It's talking about when it comes to people and processes and all of the things that go into that. And so really great talk today. Thank you so much. Thanks, Ramin, for all your great insights as usual. and I hope everyone enjoyed this episode.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Securing the Future podcast with your hosts, Jesse Metters and Ramin Lamay. If you enjoyed, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a rating.